Hey Jerks, and welcome to day 7 of the Beer Jerk Advent Calendar. I'm Matt.
And I'm Luke.
And we are here drinking a Kölsch from Mount Brewing in the Mount Maunganui.
I'm Kölner, which means beneath Cologne Cathedral. This is a... I'm so good at pouring beers.
8 years and Luke still hasn't learned how to pour a beer
So
properly.
good at my job. Prost!
Prost.
Mount have been doing some really fantastic beers recently. The last few years. We sort of didn't think too much about Mount. We didn't drink much of their beer for a period of a few years and didn't really get any in. And I was going to say forgot about, but that sounds like super mean and rude. So sorry, Mount. We didn't forget about you. We knew you were there. It's just we did try new beers for a while. And then they got in touch with maybe a couple of years ago, and Pavel was doing really great things in the brewery. They started packaging their beers in cans and just doing some really, really impressive stuff. A lot of interesting historic European beer styles. And just across the board, we were into their beers, right?
Yeah, we're really impressed by their core range in general, and they put out some great hazies, which were particularly fantastic. We got some in as beer of the one of them in as beer of the week. Doing some really cool stuff with their seasonals. They put out some pastry sours and stuff like that recently. But this is a Kölsch, which is, we said a couple of days ago that we were going to take you on a little lager odyssey. And this is kind of the end of this little patch in the Advent calendar, but it's not actually a lager. So a Kölsch is a really interesting historical beer style from Germany, as we tend to talk about here at Beer Jerk. And a Kölsch, despite appearing and tasting very similar to a lager, is actually an ale. So as we've talked about probably exhaustively over the last 2 videos, the ales and lagers are fermented with different yeast strains. So this is fermented warmer with an ale yeast strain, but it's at the lower end of that ale yeast temperature range, usually fermented about 17, 18 degrees, and it ferments a lot faster. And you'll find that it doesn't have quite the same kind of yeast bite as a lager, which lends it this really nice kind of softness. And one of the things about Kölsch is it's designed to be drunk in these kind of little 200ml glasses, and it's designed to be drunk super fresh. So this is a really lovely fresh Kölsch, and it's one of the ultimate in easy drinking beer styles.
Yeah, Kölsch is a beer that I adore. It's just the epitome of what, I don't know what beer is. I was chatting to a beer writer recently. I was just in Cologne, beneath the Cologne Cathedral in August this year. So went to a few Cologne breweries, and I was chatting to a beer writer afterwards, and he said, "Well, why is it so amazing, Kölsch?" And I couldn't really put my finger on it, other than it's just like, I suppose if I was in a fantasy world, if I was in heaven and I was drinking a glass of something that was just called beer, Kölsch would be what the beer tastes of. I suppose there's more body to it, but there's just a purity. It's got a dry finish that it keeps you sipping. And yeah, just being in those traditional Cologne breweries and their tap rooms was just, I'd read about them, and I've been to Cologne briefly many years ago, but I didn't go to any breweries. So this was my first trip, and it was a bit of a pilgrimage for me. And I walked into the brewery tap room and expected it to look a bit like, the hundreds of other brewery tap rooms I've been in, but there was something missing. There's no bar. So you just walk in and look a bit confused, and then just sit down somewhere. And then a very smartly dressed bloke comes around, I'm sure there are women that work there too, called a Körber, who's just a Cologne Kölsch server, who's the waiter. And he just wanders up and says, "Zwei Kölsch?" And I doubt anyone ever says no.
Why would you?
And then he just brings around a little tray that's a special Kölsch tray with these little glasses that Matt talks about that are called Stange, which just means pipe in German. So it's a little 200ml glass, and it never ends. So you get towards the bottom of your glass, and the man comes around and just puts another glass down, and there's no way to stop him. And apart from putting your beer mat on the top of the glass, that's how you stop him. And he keeps track of how many Kölsches he's sold you by putting a little mark on the beer mat every time. And then when you put the mat on top, he comes and cashes up and charges you an extremely small amount of money. It's also ridiculous how cheap beer is in Germany.
Yeah, and so that's the idea. Is one of the things that we talked about is that Kölsch is designed to be drunk fresh, so poured fresh and drunk cold. So that's why they keep pouring it in those little glasses. so that that your Kölsch never has a chance to get cold. You sip away at your 200 ml glass, and then another one is whisked in place. It's kind of the ideal serving solution. We should start a
Kölsch pub.
Pub? Sounds ideal.
And also, so it always has a head as well, because for a lot of German people, if a beer doesn't have a head anymore, like this one, then they just say it's dead, and they just stop drinking it and get another beer. Because, and to be fair, a lot of the aroma comes from the head, all those little bubbles popping underneath your nose.
Yeah, so this one is brewed in relatively traditional fashion. So it's using classic German Pilsner malt. It uses a little bit of Vienna, and I think there's a
bit of wheat for body. Yep.
Nice. And then traditional noble hops, Tettnang and Hallertau Mittelfrüh, which are kind of those giving that classic German hop profile, fermented with a Kölsch yeast. And then it's just got this really lovely softness to it, where I prefer Kölsch to your standard kind of lagers, your pale international lager, your kind of standards, because of that softness that it provides. It's got a little bit more sweetness to it in the mid palate, which then dries away. But you're getting that kind of lovely kind of bready bread crust malt character coming through. But yeah, it's a beer that's designed to taste like beer, be light, get out of the way, allow conversation, and but there's a lot to it if you kind of sit down and really dig into it.
Yeah, fantastic social lubricant. And if you're only going to drink one kind of beer, then this would be pretty good. And in fact, I chatted to a lot of people in these these German brew pubs that I was in, and it's just quite German people in Cologne that I chatted to found it quite difficult to understand the idea of a bar that has even more than one kind of beer, that has lots of beers. And I was chatting to a young couple, and the girl was from Cologne, and she was just saying, well, yeah, this is beer. That's you go to a bar, you ask for a beer, you get a Kölsch. And her boyfriend was from down the Rhine a little bit, who was from Kreuznach, and he was saying that, yeah, in my town, you can also get a wheat beer, you can get a Dunkel sometimes, sometimes you get a Pilsner. And his girlfriend said, yeah, that is because you have no culture. And it's just a thing that just the Cologne people just identify with so closely, that this is their beer. And of course, just down the river, they've got Dusseldorf and now the Altbier, which is, their take on things. And in Dusseldorf, you only drink alt beer. So I really love the idea of just a sense of place attached to a drink.
Yeah, it's that history and regionality that you get in countries with that ancient beer history. You see it in Belgium, you see it in Germany, you see it in Britain, where those kind of regional variations can mean a lot to the local community. And I think particularly highlighted by that example of Kölsch and Altbier, where they're two neighbouring towns which have their own different take, and then you've got Helles in different parts of Germany. Just like in Belgium, you'll see all sorts of different interpretations of farmhouse ales, saisons, triples, doubles, quads. The naming convention isn't as diversified and stratified as it is in Germany, but you do see a lot of regional variation, and people in one town will say, this is the kind of beer that we make here. And that's something that in the New World in particular that we don't really have, as we've kind of borrowed beer styles from all over the world in different countries and different cultures. And it's a different way of drinking. But yeah, it's really nice to have a Kölsch like this, which really represents that traditional way of enjoying beer.
And you can see why there is pushback in countries like Germany to the modern craft beer movement. And there was a wonderful, just a microcosm of this that happened probably 6 years ago when Stone Brewing from California, just one of the biggest independent craft beer breweries in the US.
At the time. Sold now.
Yeah, very different story now. They opened up a wonderful, beautiful brewery and bar and venue in Berlin. And I went to visit just before they officially opened, but they still served me a few beers and I got to check it out, and it was just so impressive. And there's a really good documentary I'd recommend you check out about Greg Cook, who's the founder of Stone. I think the documentary is called Beer Jesus, maybe, that was named after a newspaper headline that came out in Germany, which basically said the Beer Jesus from America is here to teach us about beer. And of course the Germans would be like, who the hell are you? You were born yesterday, you can't teach us about beer. And And sure enough, the brewery closed after maybe a year and a half, and they sunk endless millions of dollars into it.
And Brewdog bought it, didn't they?
Brewdog bought it, yeah.
So I don't know how that's going for them, but
yeah, it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, it's definitely a country with strong feelings about beer.
Yeah, there's not a lot of craft beer in Germany still. There's some little shoots coming up and some promising craft beer breweries, but as I say, really, why would you be that bothered about modern craft beer when you have Kolsch to drink?
Why would you?
Oh, and lastly, a really nice thing that Mount do is, so they have Pavel, who's the head brewer, who's Polish, and he's really talented and fantastic. And they've got a really good little brew team, and they put the name of the brewer on the can. So this was a recipe by Leonie Hönig, who is from Cologne. So she was inspired to brew this beer after going home to Cologne. And I noticed that her name's Honig, which means honey in German, and I get some honey malt character in this beer.
Yeah, I mean, honey malt's the kind of traditional profile that you get in a Kolsch. So
yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised that you're getting some of that from that malt base.
Yeah. Good beer.
Good beer. Cheers, Jerks. See you tomorrow.
And cheers to you.